Hello there! In this second bonus video, we will add a new feature to the game where we will spawn more balls if the existing one lives too long. We want to spawn a ball every 5 seconds from the previous ball on top of the ones we're already spawning. To simplify the implementation and integration of this new feature, we will create a Lua module that will manage the entire ball's lifecycle. But first, we're going to make some minor updates to the ball movement script. Let's go ahead and open that up. Okay, so first things first, we don't want the ball to delete itself. This will be a responsibility of the module we're gonna create soon. So let's go ahead and get rid of this, just because it would make things a lot more complicated to keep track of. We want to be doing things in a centralized way. Second, we need to remember that the update function is called multiple times per second. So now that the object is not deleted immediately, we need to manually stop this object from sending more than one message, right? The consequences of getting rid of that go.delete statement is that while this object is being deleted from outside, there's a possibility we're going to be sending a lot of out-of-bounds messages. And our current design, our current game, assumes we only get this once per ball. We're not handling this outside. So to keep this promise, to keep this behavior, what we're going to do is we're going to create a flag to keep track of whether this object, the ball, this specific instance of a ball, is out of bounds or not. So let's go ahead and add a new flag here. We'll call it out of bounds. And we're going to set it to false first. Okay, so the first things we'll do is we'll check it here, right? If we are out of bounds, then we just want to ignore the update function. We don't want to be doing anything, right? So this will make sure that once we're out of bounds, it's not doing anything else. So of course we're not setting it to true. So let's go ahead and do that before we forget. So yeah, right before we send the message, we are gonna make sure that if the ball is out of bounds, we update the state, and this will make it so there's only one message sent. And so the last thing we're gonna do is, because we're not deleting the balls here anymore, like from within itself, we're gonna have to keep track of balls that we're spawning. We hadn't been doing that because balls were handling themselves, but now we're gonna handle them from outside, from a module. So we're gonna have to identify the balls somehow. So we're gonna do that through a script property. We're gonna add a property for the ball ID. So ball underscore ID. We're gonna set it as 0 first. And we also will have to communicate it here in the out of bounds message. So let's go ahead and add it. This way we're communicating which ball is the one that left, and we can handle the logic from outside. Awesome, and we're done with the movement script. So let's go ahead and continue with the module. Well, we're gonna talk about modules in a bit. So let's start by creating a directory or folder here. Under the main folder, we're gonna call this modules. And we'll go ahead and create a Lua module. So new Lua module, we'll call it ball underscore spawn timer. So what is a module? Modules allow us to encapsulate state, and this will make things more reusable and isolated, also even testable. They're really helpful to create individual pieces of logic. In this case, it will simplify the ball's lifecycle logic, as it won't be all over the main controller, so it will be in a single place. Even though it's not really accurate, you can compare them to classes or objects from other languages if you're familiar with other languages, although they're not the same, but bear that in mind. But this is how things are encapsulated in Lua. There are multiple ways to create modules. They all have their own pros and cons. As usual, we'll leave a link in the description below with Defold's official documentation on modules. Again, the document is amazing, it's really good, and we really recommend that reading. And for this video, we're gonna be using the closures approach. Okay, so let's start by creating a table called M. This is for the module. And before we forget, we need to return it. So when we import it, we actually get the module. right? Otherwise we'll get a nil pointer exception. Next, we typically add just one function to the module. So it's a function, should be public, so we have access to it. It's called new. We'll probably use some parameters, but for now let's start like this and we'll add them as we need them. Inside this function we need to create yet another table, another Lua table, and this will be for the state. You can think of this as an instance of the module. Let's also make sure to return it, because this is what we actually get from a new function. Otherwise we're gonna get some errors. Okay, we're gonna start the state with, we know that we need to keep track of the balls, right? So let's start the state with another table. So this is where we're gonna be adding the balls we're spawning, and also how we would remove them or delete them from the game. Okay, let's, we know we're gonna have to spawn balls here, and we're already doing that in the main controller. So let's go ahead and bring this function over. Here, we don't really need to place it anywhere special. We're gonna only be using it inside the new function. So this is great. So first things, right? We're gonna notice there's no self here. So let's go ahead and get rid of self. And this also shows us that we'll need to get the position from somewhere, right? And let's just go ahead and simplify things and add it here. We're just gonna ask for the ball position on the parameters. So let's go ahead and just let's update that. Okay, we said we need to track this, right? So we would need to update the state.balls, and we need to supply an ID. We also need to send it here, right? We need to populate the property script we added in the ball movement script. Let's keep track of an ID. So let's create an ID here, a local variable for the current ID. We'll instantiate that as 0. Okay, and before we spawn a ball, we'll just increase it to make sure they all get unique IDs. So we would use the current ID as the index, or the ID really for the table. And as we said, we also need to specify it. So this next parameter is the rotation. We don't need to rotate anything, so we'll just specify nil, and we'll supply the ball ID as the current ID that we have here. Cool. I think this should be enough for the spawn ball logic. We'll test it in just a bit. Okay, so we know we need to start this somehow, right? We need to start spawning balls at some point. So let's go ahead and add a function. So we'll do state.start. It's going to be a function. We don't need a name there. Okay, so to make things easier for us, we're gonna check if there is already a timer set. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a timer. So the way we do this in Defold is with the timer object. So you have a timer, and it's nice we get some auto completion. As you see, it has mainly 3 functions: cancel, delay, and trigger. We can see that cancel and trigger receive a handle, and that handle is what we get when we create a trigger by using the delay function. So the handle is what we're storing in the state.timer property, and that we get it through the delay, right? Now, delay is something we don't have here yet, as we can see. We know it's 5 seconds, as we discussed, but we don't really want to handle configuration here. Again, same as the position, we're just gonna receive it by parameter. We know that we want to repeat it. We want to keep spawning balls every 5 seconds. And yeah, the callback, as we said, we want to spawn balls. So all we need to do is pass in the spawn ball function. Now there is a bit of a thing here, right? The timer has a delay of 5 seconds, meaning that when we call the start function, nothing would happen, at least not immediately, right? As it is right now. So we do want to spawn a new ball. So we get this immediately, right? And to make things a bit simpler, what we're gonna do is, whenever we call the state.start, we're gonna check if there's already a timer set. So if state.timer is different, let's have a look. It's not nil, meaning it's set. What we'll do is we'll cancel this, but we'll cancel it directly. So state.timer. This is how we would cancel timers in Defold. Okay, now we'll also need a cancel function, and we're not going to be using it here because in our cancel function, we also want to be make sure that we're deleting the ball, right? And we'll know we'll need some sort of canceling, so we stop spawning balls. For example, when the game is over, right? Once that we show the message that the game is over and someone has won, we don't want to be spawning any more balls. We just want the game to stay paused. Let's work on the cancel function. Oops. Let's work on the cancel function. So stay the cancel. It's actually gonna look very similar, so we can just go ahead and copy state, because we need to cancel the timer, right? And we'll only want to do this if there is a timer, just to be safe. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna iterate. So we'll use the pairs. So just bear in mind we need to use pairs and not I pairs. We don't need the ID of the ball, and what we have is the reference here. The value is the reference to the node, to the object that's created, and the list would be state.balls. Okay, now we need to do things. So yeah, we just want to delete the ball, so go.delete, and the reference is the actual ball. Nice. This is iterating over this table. So what we need to do as well is make sure that the table, once we delete the objects from the game, we also delete the objects, the references from memory, right? Yeah, it looks like we're ready to start integrating the module. Okay, so let's go ahead main controller and start integrating. Yeah. So first things, in order to use this, we need to import it. So we'll create a local variable. We'll call it local ball spawn timer. And what we'll do then is say require, and then we pass in like the folder structure, but with dots instead of slashes. So for example, because this is under the main folder, that's the first folder we have, then it's inside modules, and then what we have is the name of the module itself, like the file name. So ball spawn timer. I think this looks good, so let's go ahead and keep going. Next, we'll initialize the timer right before we spawn the ball. Here, this is the first place where we're gonna need it. We initialize the game, and we need to, well, before we spawn balls, we need to create a timer, right? Now this timer is the one that's in charge of spawning balls. So let's go ahead and create a new timer. So self.spawn ball timer would be, yeah, spawn ball timer dot new, and we get some nice auto completion, which means we probably have things the right way. We don't have a delay just yet, so I'm just gonna leave it there and we'll add it next. We do have the position, so let's go ahead and put that here. We'll create a constant, We'll create a constant here for the ball. We'll call it ball spawn timer delay. And yeah, it will be 5 seconds as well, as we've been discussing. We're just gonna be using that there, and this should be okay. Now, to spawn balls, this function is already being used to spawn balls, so we can just go ahead and update the implementation. We're already handling this creation, the factory create inside the timer. So what we can do is just start the timer there. Whenever we need to spawn a ball, we just start the timer. This will, remember, this will spawn a ball as we've implemented. This will spawn a ball, and then it will create a timer to keep spawning balls. We haven't handled the cancel logic, and we want to cancel the timer once the game is over. So after we send the game over message, we can just go ahead and call the cancel, the cancel function. We can probably start testing and see what this looks like. We should be getting some more balls. Let's see if the timer is actually working. Oh, and it seems like it is. Now we need to test the cancel, so that's probably a bit trickier maybe. So let's see if the game is over, if the timers stop. They do. Awesome. Okay, there's just one thing left. We're not handling the out of bounds logic, right? If a ball goes out of bounds and the game's still going, so there's no game over yet, all of those balls, none of those balls actually, are being deleted. So just to clean up after ourselves, just as good practice, in general, let's handle out of bounds logic. So we'll go back to the bounce ball timer and we'll add a out of bounds function. That way we can delete balls as they leave the screen. For a game, it's probably not too important to be as efficient as possible, but I think it's just good practice in general to clean up after yourself. It's not that complicated, and it just helps managing the game, right? Like if at some point you have a bunch of different modules like this or pieces of logic that just are spawning things all over, that can start piling up and really hurt your game's performance. So I think it's always good practice just to clean up after yourself. So let's go ahead and do that. We need the ball ID, right? The main controller will tell us that a given ball has left the screen, it's out of bounds. Just make sure that the ball actually exists. This shouldn't really fail, but again, just good practice to make sure things exist. So if it exists, if it's not nil, we're gonna delete the ball so it's actually cleaned up. What we'll do is saying we just access. We get the reference to the state .balls table, and we just pass in the ball ID. So that's how we delete it, and we also make sure again to delete it from the table, the state table here. So we just assign it to nil. Awesome. We shouldn't see. Let's just test that we haven't broken anything. There shouldn't be any visible change, but we should really be. Oh, well, obviously we're not calling this. So to test that we're actually doing this, let's just add like a print line here. We're gonna remove it at the end, but I'll just call this state out of bounds. And then I don't know, just ball ID will be fine. We're not calling this anyway, so it's not gonna be called yet. So let's go ahead and do that. This is where we're handling the out of bounds logic. So right before we spawn a new ball, let's call the out of bounds message here. The function, sorry, so we do the out of bounds, and now the ID, we have it as message the ball ID. This is the main reason why we sent it from the ball movement script, this ball ID. So yeah, let's see if we're handling this correctly. We can see there, and yeah, state out of bounds, the ID 1, ID 2, yeah, seems like it's working. Awesome. Thank you for watching this video. Again, if you have any feedback, please let us know. We are working on a new series, so we'll probably won't add too much content to this series, but any feedback is greatly appreciated. So leave a comment if you have some. And yeah, please like and subscribe. It really helps us. And stay tuned. Yeah, see you soon.